welcome to another episode of the Plutus Awards podcast. I'm your host, Chris Browning. Our community is filled with hundreds of stories from creators and entrepreneurs just like you. And through this podcast, we plan to share these stories from bloggers to podcasters, writers, speakers, and more. Let's meet today's guest.
Hi, my name is Ashley Barnett. I am a blog manager. I have been a personal finance blogger since 2008. I started doing it because I love to talk about money and I feel like it's a message that people need to hear. And I continue because I love blogging. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And I love FinCon, so I continue.
So we usually hear a lot from the people who are sitting behind the microphone, who are on camera. I think they're very visible. They're always right there and easy for us to all see and learn about and kind of see what they're doing with their lives and how they're working on their projects. It's all very easy, very visible to see. But there are so many people who are working behind the scenes. There are people who are taking on all these projects and this work that needs to be done, but we don't hear from them very often. So I think that's why I'm so excited today to have Ashley Barnett joining me on the show. And so, Ashley.
Yes.
Thank you again for coming over, and thank you for also sharing your pop-in plant story with me before we started recording. Before we even hop into your background in the personal finance space and with blogging, you started out doing work that I think a lot of us have experienced and a lot of us have not been happy doing. You were actually working in a call center.
Yes.
And that was your day. That was what you were doing for your 9 to 5.
Yes, and it's awful. Yeah.
I've had to make calls as well for jobs, and I know how tedious and horrible and excruciating that type of work can be. And so, how long did you do that for?
I worked it was a call center for a bank taking customer service calls for credit cards. And I think I did that for probably about 2 years, right before I started blogging. Yeah. And I would get to work and I would look at my little cube and I'd think, this is where I have to spend the next 8 hours of my life. And it was awful. And I would look out the window. I could see the freeway and the cars going by. And I was like, I wonder where they're going, what they're doing. They get to be outside.
I don't know if it's worse to be by a window where you can see the outdoors or if I'd rather be sitting with no windows and just not know what I'm missing out on.
Yeah.
It's something that I think we've all experienced, sitting in a job that we're not enjoying and just kind of dreading it.
Yeah.
So for you ended up starting your family. Once you're at home, you decided to start a project of your own. And you started your very first blog in 2005.
Yes.
And what pushed you to go that direction?
I don't really know. Blogging was kind of hitting the radar for me anyways. And it's kind of like the cool, interesting new thing to do. None of my family lives in Arizona with me. So I had these little ones at home and I just wanted to kind of just record and put it online for people that might be interested in my family to read about. But it wasn't something that I promoted or looked for readers or knew anything about it. I had heard on like a mom forum with other moms, somebody was blogging and they were earning $40 a month from their site. And I was completely blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to earn $40 a month. Like that was pie in the sky for me. It was something I enjoyed doing. I just liked writing and so I just did that. And then one day in 2008, I came across a personal finance blog and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I didn't know people were doing this. I've always had a thing for money and enjoyed talking about money. So as soon as I saw that, forget the mom blog. I'm doing this.
Back when you were working your full-time job at the call center, was writing something that you wanted to do or had like this passion for before you even started doing the blog?
No, not at all.
Huh. So this kind of just developed. It was just something you came across and you're like, hey, I think I would enjoy giving this a try.
This is kind of fun. When I was home and, it's great being home with your kids. I certainly don't want to disparage it, but it can get a little boring, So it was just something to do and a challenge for me and something to grow into. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I think that's really cool that sometimes it feels like you need to have this prior experience or this like passion that you've just been holding on to and not, fulfilling for all these years. But there's you have an opportunity to try something new and it seems interesting. And that's I guess, a way to get into, something different and find a project that you really enjoy.
Yeah. When in my 20s, I had heard that your 40s are the best years of your life because you get to use everything you learned in your 30s. And I
Mm.
was 29, I believe, at the time when I started writing. So I took that to mean you need to learn as much as possible in your 30s. So this was something new to learn. And I was really just in the mindset of I just want to learn as much as I can about anything I can. So blogging, I guess, was it.
I think that's a great way to think about that. I'm like, I guess I'm leaving my early 30s. So I feel like maybe I need to start learning some more stuff too, because I did not even thinking about that, because the 20s feels like that's the time where you don't even know what's going on.
Right.
Life is just happening to you at that point.
Yeah.
In the 30s, you kind of start to slow down a little bit and start to think about stuff a little bit more critically. And I didn't even think about the fact that the 40s, you have that much more experience behind you and you've already tried some stuff and
Yeah.
you can actually put it into motion. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really cool way to think about that. So you started your personal finance blog in 2008. I think you said you're just covering any area in personal finance you're thinking about, frugal living, everyday type of blog, and you're
Mhm.
giving a very open look at your finances. And so how long did you work on this blog for?
I did that site for about 2 years. I wasn't making a ton. I really didn't know how to make money online, but I was making probably about $500 a month just from Google Ads and things like that. And then I had started a local business, which was taking a lot of my time and was making a lot more money. So I had stopped the website because it just didn't make sense anymore for me at that point. I missed it immediately as soon as I quit it.
And blogging is a lot of work. So I can only imagine starting a actual business, like a brick and mortar type business, and then working on a blog at the same time is a lot to take on, because a blog is really never ending work. It's
Yeah.
there's a lot of things you can be doing, and there's always things that you think you could be doing better, and you always see examples of people doing some really cool things. And so I can see how it would be taking up a lot of your time, and it's a tough decision to choose what you're going to be working on.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you looked at the hourly rate, what I was working on that compared to like my local business, it just didn't make sense anymore. And I thought I was making a good business decision. I was not.
The fact that you're making $500 a month is, I think a lot of people will be happy to
Yeah,
to get that from their blogs. You still were doing a good job.
my goal was 40. So
You blew that out of the water. So you're running your blog and you decided to take a break, step away from it. You eventually decided to like dip your toe into freelancing because a friend, I guess, brought up an opportunity.
yeah, we were just talking at FinCon. He had a good sized site and he just said, boy, I would just wish I had somebody that I trusted that could help me, that I didn't have to train. And he had people work for him in the past and it hadn't really worked out. And we seemed to really get along well. So I said, hey, yeah, I can help you. And so that's how I got into freelancing.
Were you nervous to take on someone else's project, since, I mean, you've been working on your own things all this time? And how did that feel, taking on someone else's, I guess, blog or project and helping them out?
I wasn't nervous to do the work. What to charge, I had no idea, which is always hard when you're first starting. Like I said, we were friends. It seemed like a casual thing. So we just talked openly and, we settled on a rate we were both happy with, I hope. I was happy with it. And yeah, so I worked for him for several years. He was my only blog client. At the time, I also had some other work outside of blogging, but I just did those two things and I was perfectly happy just working on that one site.
And so you were also, so you said you're kind of balancing still multiple types of work. So not only were you managing this blog, but you're also doing other work on the side.
Yeah, also from home. Actually, my dad had passed away and he had a landscaping company. And so I was doing the books and kind of taking the phone calls and stuff for that from home and not managing, but working on that other site.
Gotcha. Okay. And so how long did you manage this blog for? Or I guess you could say work on this blog for?
I started that in 2013 and I did that up until 2 years ago. So whatever that works out to be, 4 years.
And was this something that you saw yourself getting into? Like, did you ever think that you would end up going this route? Starting as someone who was managing their own blog and writing for their own blog. Did you see yourself moving this route?
No, not at all. Thought blogging as an industry has come a long way since I started. There was no freelancing or anything like that back in the day. Everyone just ran their own sites. The only kind of freelancing I even considered as an option that I even knew existed really was to be a freelance writer.
Hmm.
I had never really heard of anybody doing kind of like virtual assistant type work. So, no, I had not considered it in any way. And I never thought I'd have more than one client either. I was just going to work for him for the rest of my life if he would have me.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show how many opportunities are out there that you just don't hear about. Because for me, this is the same way. When I hear about freelancing, I'm thinking about people who are writing for others. I would never even think about what the work you're doing as an option.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool that you found this, and almost kind of inadvertently, you found this other form of freelance work.
Yeah. I mean, if you're open to it, the opportunities are unlimited. And I find it so interesting to watch the FinCon people that I know kind of fall into their own little unique niches. It's really cool.
So for you, once this freelancing position that you're in, where you're helping manage this blog, ended, what was your next step? How did you go about finding new clients? Because I'm assuming that since you're still doing this, you found other people to work with.
Yeah, when that opportunity ended, he did have some referrals for me of other people he knew that were looking for the kind of work that I did. So that worked out nicely. I transitioned really quickly into some other clients. And then I went to FinCon, I think 2 FinCons ago. Anyways, yeah. So then I went to FinCon for the very first time, actually looking for work with the intention of getting work. I prepared for that by making up a little list of services that I did, and I carried it around with me in my bag. I don't think I actually gave it to anybody, but I was ready. When people asked me what I did, I had a name for it. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I didn't push it on anybody. I wasn't aggressive with it, but if people asked me what I did, I could confidently say what I did. And I think that is a good start to a conversation.
I think so too. I've talked to several people who have kind of helped me in making connections with other people and giving me advice. And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that they gave was that when you meet someone, the first thing out of your mouth shouldn't be, "Hey, I do this. I would like to work with you," or "Hey, I would like you to do this." It's being a little more casual about it, a little more maybe courteous in your approach, and kind of just talking with people and building relationships. And if it comes up naturally, it comes up naturally. If not, you've at least made that connection and you can follow up with them at a later time, or who knows if you'll come across them again. And I think it makes it that much easier to build those business relationships that kind of just talk with people and build personal relationships.
Right.
So that made me think of that when the way you said how you've approached people and how you got into these situations where you can work with others is through just talking with them and meeting them and letting it come up naturally and not forcing it. Because that can turn people off and push them away.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've all been approached by that person. And then you
Yeah.
see them later and you're like, oh, here they come. I got to go. Yeah.
Like, where's the nearest bathroom? Let me duck in here really quick. Yeah, because I don't think anyone wants to get pitched to constantly.
No.
I think it's nice to just, meet people, and then you can determine if you want to work with them based off of how well you get along. Because it's all about fit.
Yeah.
Someone can be really good at what they do, but if it's not a good fit, it's not going to work out.
Exactly.
So,
and I don't want just any client. I'm not looking to work with everybody.
yeah,
So I also need to judge them and see if I think they're a good fit for me.
exactly. And what better way to do that than having these conversations with people and being interested in enough to learn about them and figure out what they're about and see how you're going to meld together if that opportunity arises.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're at FinCon, you're doing a good job of making connections, talking with people. Was this scary for you? I mean, for me, especially with the first time I attended a conference, I was very nervous to just walk up to people and I didn't know
Sure.
what I was doing. It's also new and it can be really scary to put yourself out there. How did you feel while you were doing this and how did you get over that enough to make connections?
Yeah, I feel like I'm really lucky in that I've been to every FinCon. So when I started going, I had my own site. I was not looking for anything particular other than to meet all these people that I have been talking to online for years. So it was just a very casual thing. And the first, 5 or 6 were that way. I had all these relationships. I'm very comfortable at FinCon. I have a lot of friends and people I'm genuinely excited to see. So I did luck out in that regard. It was
Mm.
not a nervous, I didn't feel nervous. I could see if I was starting today and going to a 3,000 person conference where I don't know anybody. Yeah, that would be scary for sure.
But yeah, you did take the time to build relationships. So that
Yeah.
I think that's a theme I'm noticing that was pretty key is that making these relationships and it takes away that nervousness when you actually know people versus I'm just
Yeah.
like a cold call walking up to
Hmm.
somebody and asking for their business.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm genuinely excited about what they do.
Mm.
When I ask them, what do you have going on? I'm genuinely asking. I want to know, not because I'm one trying to find a way in, because I want to know. I'm curious. I love this stuff. So
No, that's a great approach. I think people appreciate you coming to them with that type of approach. And so you actually landed a pretty big client when
yeah.
you went out with this intentionality. And so you started working with Choosify, which is a pretty big podcast and blog I think a lot of people are familiar with. How did that come about?
Yeah. It was this particular FinCon that I was actively looking for work. I just met Jonathan walking around, talking to vendors and stuff, and just hanging out in the main area there. And Jonathan loves to talk. So he's like, "Hey, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I am a content manager," which I had my answer all prepared, so I was ready. And he was like, "Oh, we're looking for that. We're looking to really get going on our blog." And so we sat down and we talked for less than 5 minutes. Just kind of asked me my background. I went over what I've done in the past, and that was it. And then we were off. And I don't think I saw him again the entire conference. And when we got home from FinCon, I sent him an email a couple of days later and just like, "Hey, just wanted to check back in with you. I don't know if it's something you're still looking into. Here's my list of services and my rates. And yeah, let me know if you're interested." And I didn't hear a single word for 3 months.
That must have been tough
It is. It's the worst. Yeah, that's the worst when you tell someone your rates and they don't reply.
because your first reaction to that is, I put way too much money down, didn't I?
Yeah, like, "Oh, I charged too much. My services aren't good. I was too aggressive. I wasn't aggressive enough. I should have said this. I should have said that." You go around and around in your mind, and it has nothing to do with you in the end. You find out, but yeah, it's nerve wracking.
Yeah, it's hard not to have that feeling. And I saw online Stephanie O'Connell. She posted this quote. I'm probably going to butcher it because I never remember quotes the right way ever. But it was something along the lines of, when you if you send someone your rates and they don't respond, that doesn't mean that your rates are too high. And it was like just to kind of stress the point that maybe they're just not interested. Maybe they're busy. You don't know why, but that doesn't mean that means you're charging too much. Maybe
No.
there could be hundreds of other factors as to why you didn't hear back.
Yeah.
So I can definitely understand the feeling of sending something out and then just all the self-doubt that kind of floods in.
Yeah. I mean, think about yourself. You've gone to Target and looked at a price at something and then left without buying it. Target doesn't freak out and think that they're charging too much, right?
Exactly.
It's just that's shopping. But still, it doesn't make it any easier to know that that's happening.
But now that we know what's going on, it's safe to say that this ended up working out for you. So you did eventually get a get a response back.
Yes, they just weren't ready to pull the trigger at that exact moment. They had also just gotten back from FinCon, so they had a lot to think about. Yeah, so 3 months later, I did get an email back that he wanted to continue conversations, and we got on the phone and we hammered it out. And yes, I got a job.
That is amazing. That's really cool to hear. I think it shows the power of following up after you you leave a conference, even though the response wasn't immediate, which is I think understandable. But following up made the difference.
For sure. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can just be like, "Hey, I enjoyed talking with you. Here's my Facebook, be my friend," and be done, and just begin a conversation.
Exactly, exactly. And so once you got this job, you got and you're excited. Did you feel prepared for this? Did this feel like, hey, this is just another job. I've been doing this for a while now. Or was it like I'm taking skills from all these other jobs I've done and putting it together? I mean, were there nerves involved? How did you feel about jumping into this project?
Yeah, there were definitely nerves involved for sure. Of course, anytime you get a new client, even if it's work you've been doing for years, you feel a little nervous getting started. They had hired a bunch of writers. The blog pretty much was non existent. and we were launching it. So I had never managed writers before. So that was new. And I was completely in charge of it. They didn't really have any insight into what they even kind of wanted. So it was totally up to me to build this pretty much from the ground, and which is not something I had done before. But I did feel confident that I could do it. I've been blogging at that point for almost 10 years. So I felt like I could do it. Yeah.
You had some confidence in yourself based off of, past experience because you've been doing it for years at this point.
Yeah. I knew I could, but there was definitely growth involved, and I had to figure things out as I went along for sure.
Which I think that makes any project worthwhile. It's like you don't want to do something that's super easy and you can do it with your eyes closed. You're not. I mean, it's not as much fulfillment as taking on something big and trying something new and learning as you go along. I think there's something to say about that type of experience.
Yeah, you always want to be growing and doing something new for sure.
Yeah, exactly. First of all, thank you for sharing your story. I feel like I know you much better now, and I'm really inspired. And I respect that journey that you took to get to this point because I think you really put yourself out there and you really, I think, built up your skills and built up some really strong relationships across, multiple years. I think really show a good example of how to go about doing this. And so for people who are listening and they're like, you know what, maybe they blog right now or they podcast and maybe this isn't for me. I'm looking for another type of work without having to go back and pick up a W-2 job, which I don't want to do.
Yeah.
So what would be your recommendation for people who are interested in hopping into freelance work, especially specifically kind of the style of work that you're doing right now?
I started as just general VA, virtual assistant. If somebody wanted to do that today and came to me, I would tell them, number one, don't really worry too much about what you're charging. Just get some clients. That's number one. You can always charge more later. And that's the biggest stress point for people who are trying to start their own gig, usually is how much am I going to charge? How do I ask for money? That's a big deal when it's the very first time you ever have to pitch someone. That's hard.
Yeah.
So don't worry too much about making sure you're charging every dollar that you're worth. Just get a job. If you have to charge a little less, if that's what you're comfortable with, or that's what you have to do, fine, not a problem. You're going to get so much more than money from your very first client. So just get some clients. Preferably someone you have a good rapport with already so that they know you're new, you can be new, you can make mistakes, you can ask a lot of crazy questions. It's nice to just have somebody that you're comfortable with and you don't have to be all buttoned up and perfect all the time for. Once you have your first client, then the next client you can charge a little bit more, and the next client a little bit more. And you want to just kind of start building up your client list, and you want to be filling your hours. So once you feel like you're pretty much booked out and you have like all the clients that you need or can handle, let's say that's 3 clients. So you have 3 clients, you're not charging a super ton, but you're learning a lot. You're figuring out who you like to work with, what kind of client you like, what kind of work you like to do, what you're good at. You're figuring all this out. You've never done it before. It's okay if you don't know. You just got to get in there and start. So let's say you have 3 clients and you're doing that, and you can bring on your 4th client who you're charging the highest rate yet so far. So let's say you started at $10, then the next client you might charge 11, and the next client you might charge 12, and just start pushing it up. Once you have a full roster and you're bringing on the next client, you're going to have to drop one, right?
Okay.
So you bring on the next client that's paying the most so far, and drop one of your other clients. And that's okay. You're allowed to do that.
Oh, I want to ask you a quick question about that. How do you go about having that conversation? Do you give them the opportunity to maybe offer you more? Or are you just like, sorry, I have a new client. I have to, I don't have the workload, the capacity to, take this on.
Yeah. I guess it kind of depends on, I just go. If you love them and you really love the work, well, then you're probably not going to drop them anyway. But as you learn what you like, you're going to get clients that work better for you and the work you enjoy more. So your business will evolve, and you can drop the clients that no longer fit into the evolution of your business. It doesn't have to be all about the money.
Gotcha.
You may keep your lowest paying client because you love them and the work is in line with what you want to do. That's okay.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
And when I do leave a client, I always offer to train the next person who's coming behind me. I want the transition to be as smooth as humanly possible for the client. If they give me the opportunity, I'll go out and I'll find someone I think is a good fit. I'll train them. I want it to be seamless for the client as much as possible.
No, I think that's a really great point that you mentioned there is that, I mean, you don't want to burn any bridges. You
No,
don't want to leave someone and make them hate you now that you're gone.
right.
I think that's such I think a very professional and respectable way to move, say, transition from one client to another by giving them an opportunity because you never know who these people are going to, be later on. You don't know if you're going to run across them, years down the road. Maybe this is Choosify in the beginning stages, and all of a sudden, a few years later, they're like this huge, podcast and blog, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember when you just kicked me to the curb and didn't even say anything about it." So I
And
think it's always good
yeah,
to keep those relationships.
and I do genuinely care about my clients,
Mm,
I I don't want to leave them hanging, but just because someone was a good fit for you a year ago doesn't make them a good fit today.
yes.
And vice versa. They're ready to move on too, maybe. I don't know.
No, that makes complete sense. And I think that's a great point that you brought that up. I'm happy you mentioned that. And before we get out of here, what would be your last piece of advice for someone who's in this space? They followed your advice so far. They've started picking up clients. They're slowly raising their rates. What would be your next piece of advice for them on how to continue to grow their business?
Yeah. Eventually, as you get more clients and you're raising your rate for each one, you're going to top out at an hourly rate. And just because somebody pushes back one time doesn't mean that you've reached the top. But if you find, this is your ideal client and you quote them and they're like, "Oh, gee, that's really more than I was thinking," you've probably hit the top. And at that point, you want to switch to a flat rate, like a project based rather than hourly. You can usually get a little more for that. And by this point, you really have your skills honed. You know exactly what you like to do. You're good at it. You're experienced. You can charge the top rates. So you move to a flat rate schedule. Then you follow the same process. Each client pays a little more, and eventually, again, you're going to top out as a flat rate. And if you want to continue to make more money at that point, then you can start hiring and start leveraging other people.
So you're basically, as you get to a certain price threshold, you can start bringing in people who maybe are just getting started
Exactly.
and use that to help continue to build your business. I'm sure at some point you can get to a point where you have more work than you could probably complete in a day on your own.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the goal, right? And even if, oh gosh, maybe you don't work 40 hours a week anymore, that's
Mm.
okay.
Yeah, man, that's ideal.
Yeah, and then once you do that, if you start building your team, really the sky's the limit at that point.
No, I think that's really cool. I've always wondered what that progression looks like because I'm not on this side of things. I've never built up a blog management or even a blog business on my own. So that's really interesting to see how that process works. And I really appreciate you being open and sharing all this information. I think allowing people to get a little insight into your journey and seeing a different route to take, I guess, their business and their time, because I think so often we get focused on being the blogger, being the podcaster, being on the very visible side. And maybe that's not going to fit for everyone. I would say it's not going to fit for everyone. This gives people a really good picture of what it looks like to build a business on the other side of things, on managing blogs, on being a virtual assistant. And I hope that this will be some encouragement and some guidance for people to get started. And we would love to hear from them. So if you listen to this and you've decided, hey, I want to give this a try, we'd love to hear from you. Love to hear how you're doing and how this experience has been for you. So thank you again, Ashley. I really appreciate you sharing your experience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks again to all of you for joining us here for another episode of the Plutus Awards podcast. Next week, I am joined by Jen Smith, one half of the Frugal Friends podcast team and recent finalist for Best New Personal Finance Podcast. Jen is going to share with us how she cultivated a very engaged and thriving community around her podcast, which is a very difficult task to do. So I definitely recommend that you subscribe so that way you can catch that episode and more here on the Plutus Awards podcast. You can learn more about our guests and the Plutus Awards podcast at plutusawards.com/podcast and on Instagram at Plutus Awards. Again, thanks so much for joining us, and remember to keep creating.